I'll show you quickly how I like to set this tent up. So it comes with a very lightweight DCF stuff sack. So the first thing to do is to pick a side and stake out the two corners. You don't want to pull this that taut because you're going to need some flexibility for the next step. I like to go to the far side and find the peak. Pro tip here is that you have to be a little bit careful. If you just put the pole into this cup, you might pinch the mesh. I like to set my trekking poles to 115 centimeters for this particular tent. So pull kind of taut and then back off just a couple inches. If you pull it too tight, it'll actually mess it up. And this part's important to get a nice pitch too. So you want to pull in a straight line, take a peek through the tent, make sure that the guy line on the other side of the stake, that pole and this pole are all in as straight of a line as possible. And that'll just really help with a nice pitch. Same thing on this guy line here. Try to keep it all in line. There are line locks on the top so you can get this a little bit more snug. And at this last step, I find that even though I set up this tent quite a bit, I always have to go back to my first two corners and just re-stake them to get a better pitch. I almost never get it perfect on the first try, but it's just a quick adjustment like this. And then you can go around and you can tension each one of these things as needed. All right, so that's how I like to set it up. You'll notice that I kept the vestibules here rolled up. To put those down, they're both on a toggle. So one thing that's sort of unique to the Duplex is instead of using a zipper for the fly, it uses this clip toggle system. And so this is actually what it is. It's just a double hooked clip on a line lock. And the way it works is you find this little D-ring on each one of the doors, connect them like so, and then you pull the line lock. And when you pull that, it snugs it all down like so. There is a heavy-duty wind flap that just helps with the closure on that. Let's take a look at some of the features of this particular tent. So here is the way that the vestibule closes. It has that line lock that goes to that double loop hook that goes into the D-rings on each side. You can't get the vestibule to be completely closed. It's a symmetrical tent. The toggle there in the dead center is for the freestanding kit, which I'll demonstrate how that works in just a little bit. And let's take a look at the inside. So it's very roomy on the inside. There's a ton of headroom in the center. There's a pocket on both sides. The tent is symmetrical. It is a single walled tent, so the mesh connects directly to the DCF fabric, and there's mesh for condensation drips to go around at the head and the foot. You'll notice that elastic right there in the center. That's what holds the floor up, like in the bathtub configuration, so it doesn't just plop down on the ground. But that's really the only way that the ends get held up. One of the major benefits to the Duplex is that it has the ability to be a freestanding tent if you purchase these separate carbon poles that Zpacks makes. It includes this nice DCF bag here. It's so light that I don't dare put it down on the ground, it'll blow away. These poles are incredibly lightweight. They are not very inexpensive. If you buy them directly from Zpacks, they're about $180 for the set. They're all symmetrical, so there's 4 of the same. So the beauty of this is if you don't use trekking poles, or if you're setting up someplace, there's tent platforms or really hard ground, like rocks where you can't easily stake it out, you can make it so it's not a freestanding, or that it is a freestanding tent instead of a stake-out trekking pole tent. So the way that it works is when you get it, the newer versions, or you can get an upgrade kit, there's these little D-rings. And then sewn into the top here, there's these other D-rings. So once you've got those crossways, it makes 2 X's on each side. That's where these center toggles come into play. So to get a proper pitch, you have to tension each one of the 4 corners. So there you have it. This is how that pole kit works. This tent is incredibly light, even with these poles. I mean, this feels absolutely weightless. You will get a much better pitch out of this if you do stake out or at least sky out the corners. And to close the vestibules, you still do need to have this connected to something to use this clip system. I want to talk about my favorite features of this tent. I love how much room there is inside for what it is. I absolutely love the weight. It's almost impossible to beat. You are talking about a 20-ounce tent for 2 people's worth of space, or 1 palace for a single person. I really like the doors. I like the big rainbow zippers on them. It's really easy to get in and out and to set stuff up. I like how small it packs down, of course. It packs down really small. This particular model, with the ability to have the freestanding pole kit, pretty much turns it into the lightest freestanding tent on the market. I really like the other benefits of a single-walled tent that it has. So with this DCF fabric, it doesn't absorb water, it doesn't stretch. You can wipe it down and remove almost all of the water off it, and it basically dries incredibly fast because of that. There are a couple features on this tent that I'm not a huge fan of. The first really comes down to the vestibules. They're a great size, but I don't like the flap system. It is kind of nice to not have to worry about the durability or the failing of a zipper. But to me, I just don't like this clip system. Closing it up from the outside is fine. It's not hard to work with that line lock when I'm on the outside of the tent closing it up, leaving the tent. But when you're getting into the tent to go to sleep and you want to close that vestibule all the way up, it's awkward. Because in order to get to this line lock to be able to tension it, you essentially have to kind of put the door all the way down and then like stick a knee on the ground and then reach way out through that gap to reach that thing and then pull away from you. It's just awkward, and I'm not a huge fan of it. That's probably the number one thing about the tent that I'm not a fan of. The other thing is, even though there's a ton of room in here, where your head is, and granted I don't have it guyed out right now in the center, your face is very close to that roof. And the issue with that is condensation. All single wall tents are prone to that. And this one in particular I've had issues with, where you're breathing your moisture right up into that material right above your face. And I find that it does get a lot of condensation. If you can sleep with the vestibules open, you get a really nice cross breeze through here. It's not nearly as big of an issue. But in really humid conditions, camping by water or in very strong rain, you'll get a lot of condensation on here. And there really are no natural vents in this besides having the vestibule doors open. I've had a really negative experience in this tent where, even though the material itself is incredibly waterproof, all the condensation that builds up on the inside makes it very wet. And if you touch it, you'll get wet. But other than that, it's not like it's raining on you. However, because of this roof being not incredibly steep, I'd call it somewhere close to a 45-degree pitch, when you have like big heavy raindrops, for example, like drops dripping from tree branches, those really big heavy drops, it's been strong enough that it hits that rainfly hard enough that it causes splatter on the inside of the tent. And especially because my face is so close to that, it basically get these splashes on my face that are strong enough that they wake me up. So it's very unpleasant. I'll give you a couple tips on how I like to take this tent down and how I like to roll it up to make it nice and easy to set up next time. I prefer, unless I expect the weather to be bad, I really prefer to have these doors rolled up out of the way. Most of the time in solid ground, you can leave the poles kind of driven into the ground, and they do a really good job holding the tent up even as you unstake it. So I usually just do a perimeter walk, pull stakes as I go. All of them, even the end ones here. And the next thing I like to do is I like to try to grab the floor right by the pole and the peak, sort of put those together. Same thing on this side. So I bunch the center of the floor up to the peaks, which does a really good job of sort of putting that mesh into the middle. I like to shake it out, fold it in half. The trick here is to do all of your hard folds at the top, so that way when you roll it up, it pushes the air out through the bottom. So there's one. And then really quick, just loosely into thirds. And starting to roll at the head, because that's where all the creases are. I like to just tuck in the lines as I go. As I get close to the end, I grab all of the cords and sort of stuff them here so that they get tucked in. And there you go. It's basically put away. The included stuff sack is huge. It's really easy to get this into there. There you have it, really easy. Let's go over weight. So the Duplex with the included DCF stuff sack comes in on my scale at 542 grams or 19.1 ounces, which is just incredible. This is the freestanding pole kit, the 4 poles including the DCF bag that the Zpacks includes it with. And the weight of that by itself comes to 10 ounces even, or 282 grams. Trekking poles or some kind of poles are needed for this. You can't really just string it up by trees like a tarp. You really do need some kind of pole. Zpacks does make little collapsing poles specifically for this if you don't use trekking poles. But if you use trekking poles already, you don't really have to include them into the weight of the tent because you've already got them with you. This particular tent works best, in my experience, using 6 of your more solid stakes for the 4 corners, especially the 2 center ridge points by where the vestibules are. And then I like to use 2 lighter weight ones for the head and foot area, because all you're doing is pulling the fly back a little bit. So the stakes that I use with it, and of course, your weight is going to be different depending on what stakes you use. My stakes I use for are 68 grams, which comes out to 2.4 ounces. So who is this tent for? There is no doubt that this is one of the lightest possible backpacking tents that you can get, especially for a 2-person shelter. It's enormous on the inside for what it is and for how much it weighs. With the tent body itself, including the stuff sack, coming out to only about 19 ounces, you're talking just 3 ounces over a pound for a 2-person shelter that's huge for 1 person. It's almost impossible to beat. There's a reason that this tent has been considered the go-to standard for a 2-person single wall Dyneema composite fabric trekking pole tent for the last, basically since it came out. I mean, like, it's been the #1 tent in its sort of category for a very long time, and for good reason. It's incredibly light. It's well built. The design is really simple. It's pretty simple to set up. That being said, it is a single wall tent. It's definitely not for somebody that is very particular for avoiding condensation like you would in a double wall tent. If you haven't used a single wall tent before, it's a very different experience because you do get a lot of condensation inside. And if you touch the side walls, things get very wet. So it is a whole different style of sleeping in a tent, especially in humid or rainy conditions. If you are into maximum durability, or if you want a freestanding tent, this tent might not be for you. But that being said, if you're looking for a trekking pole tent, especially one that can squeeze 2 people in it, or if you want a palace for 1 person, this would be a great choice. It's an incredible tent that is super popular for good reason. If you have any questions about this particular tent or about using single wall tents in general, or tips for how to set it up or take it down, I do have a consulting website. It's www.linksoutdoorsgear.com. I'll leave a link in the description. I'm available for one-on-one consulting for just about anything you can think of, whether it comes to ultralight backpacking, mail drops, resupply, how I like to pack, all that kind of stuff. Definitely go to that website and contact me and we can work something out. Thanks so much for checking out this tent review. I have a few more tents lined up that I plan on reviewing, so stay tuned because those will be released shortly.